Hello, this is the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Today is going to be the normal weekend review. This is for the weekend of February 15th through the 17th, 2019. I will walk through the top 10 of the box office. We have 3 new wide releases that will do deeper dives on Alita Battle Angel, Isn't It Romantic, and Happy Death Day to You. And once we walk through the top 10, might talk a little bit about awards season stuff since we're in the final week of the run-up to the Oscars. And then we'll talk about what's going to happen over the next few weeks at the box office. But let's dive right into the top 10 for the weekend of February 15th to 17th. Number 1 this weekend, hot off the presses, the numbers are in. Alita Battle Angel did come in at number 1, 27.8 million. Now, it did have that sort of midweek opening last week, so its total right now sits at 36.5 million. I guess it's the 5-day total. It's also like a holiday weekend, apparently. I don't know. My job doesn't really have holidays, so I guess it's President's Day weekend. So maybe the 4-day I think is going to be a little bit higher than this, of course. So Alita Battle Angel, let's dive into it. So critically, kind of not a great quality film. Rotten Tomato critics, 59%. Actual score was 6 out of 10 from critics. Not great, kind of on the edge of fresh and rotten. Fresh is usually 60% or higher, so it's just below that. Audience score is at 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, I've talked a lot about how audience scores with Rotten Tomatoes is super weird and really easy to hack. This feels like there's some shenanigans going on, maybe with the studio or a PR company associated with the studio puffing up these numbers. It happens all the time. It's been documented. So that's one of the reasons, like, whenever I talk about Rotten Tomatoes audience score, always take it with a huge grain of salt, because it is one of those easy to manipulate scores on the web. Cinema Score is not that easy to hack because it's an in-person survey. A- for Alita Battle Angel. For some reason, Cinema Score is no longer publicly putting out their Cinema Score rating the Friday night of release. I'm not really sure why. Maybe they're getting in trouble with the studios or something, that like that score is coming out Friday night when the movie gets released, and maybe it's hurting the movie's performance sometimes. I don't know. With an A-, I think you would want to get that out there, that it's done really well. In any event, Deadline had the inside scoop on that one. So A- for Alita Battle Angel, which is pretty good. A Letterboxd score, which is a service I'm going to start sort of referring to a little bit more on the podcast. It's kind of a nerdier version of the Rotten Tomato audience score. It's not as hackable, just because it seems, why would anybody want to hack Letterboxd? It's for nerds and film nerds. So it seems honestly like a little bit more a better accuracy to the score. So Alita on Letterboxd, out of 5 stars, got 3.3, which is not bad. That's right where Avatar is on that sort of service with its users. So the picture that I'm getting here from Alita Battle Angel in terms of its actual quality as a film is okay. It's not a total disaster, but it's certainly not top shelf. And there does seem to be a separation here between the critical viewpoint, which is a little bit more negative, and the audience reactions to the film, which is a little bit more positive than what the critics are saying. But the issue here isn't necessarily the critical reception or even the quality. The problem is that the movie is massive, right? A $27.8 million opening for any movie would be okay. Per theater average is just over about $7,300 per theater. If you just said, hey, this is a wide release and it did this, I'd be like, oh, that's pretty good. Happy Death Day did about that a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago. And that was a really, really good performance for that movie. We'll get to the sequel here in a bit. So in that context, yeah, it's successful. But in the broader context, and I think more accurate context, this is a massive blockbuster film. It was shot for $200 million. That's the same amount that was spent on Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman went on to make over $400 million domestically, remember. This will come nowhere near that level of performance. This is a disaster through and through. Mostly because the production budget was way out of whack. The marketing budget was way too high. They promoted this from a product conception viewpoint. This was supposed to be a near top shelf blockbuster massive film. And it's not. I don't even know what they were thinking, believing that this film could perform on that level. Nobody in the box office world, nerd-wise or official-wise, thought that this was going to do well. It was pretty obvious as far back as a year ago that this wasn't going to be a flop. Just in terms of like the budgeting and production here, $200 million was the actual cost to produce, but they got $30 million in tax breaks from New Zealand and I think Texas. So the official production budget was $170 million. For a movie like that, you would expect at least a well over 50 into the 60 onto $100 million opening for that. Like that's what you expect. So this is a disaster. In order to break even, it reminds me a lot of that Mortal Engines movie, which is just everybody knew that it was gonna be a huge flop. No one could really quite understand why they were spending all this money on a property like that. It just didn't really connect or make sense. And Alita Battle Angel is the same way. To break even, Deadline states financial sources saying about $550 million worldwide. That will not happen. Like, there's no way it could possibly happen. Here in the States, domestically, you're looking at what, 27, starting at 36 now. My guess is that just going off the opening weekend multiplier, you're looking at, let's say, I don't know, 70 to 80-ish, maybe 65 to 80. Final total. Worldwide, let's just assume 80 and be nice to it. It's probably going to have a really low domestic ratio versus foreign ratio in terms of overall take. I would say rosiest predictions here would be like $250 million worldwide. That's half of what it needs to make in order to break even. So that's kind of gives you the sort of context of how, like, 27.8 for a normal film, yeah, probably not that bad for an opening weekend. With the 7K per theater average, okay. But within the actual context of what went into making Alita, the expectations of the film, it's an abject and complete total disaster for Fox, for James Cameron, for Robert Rodriguez. And just to do like a quick, well, before I do the postmortem, it's like 5 days out. I'm doing a postmortem. You have to, though, because it's already failed. Let's talk about who did like this film or who went to go see it. The male to female ratio, and I think this is updated through Saturday from PostTrack, these audience demographics. So male was 60%, female was 40%. That's over indexing on males significantly. Normally it's like 51 male, 49 female, the average movie going audience. So males turned up a little bit more. The under 25s was really high here, 47% versus 53%. So over indexing on the younger group here. The best grade for this movie, now remember, whenever they measure movie audiences, they usually break it down into 4 quadrants. Males over 25 and under 25 are 2 quadrants, and then females over and under 25, the other 2 quadrants. So that's your 4 quad. So when someone says 4 quad movie, it means it plays well in all 4 of those groups of people. The highest score here in terms of grade, and this is post-track, males over 25 gave it an 84%. Males under 25 gave it a 71%. Females under 25 gave it a 73%. And then females over 25 gave it a 78%. So there's already like a distinction here that like younger people didn't like it as much. Men over 25 liked it the most, but women over 25 also liked it well as well. So it's kind of a weird 4 stars on PostTrack from children. It's hard to read what went wrong here. I think there's a lot that went wrong. And so it's hard to sort of pick at exactly was the mistake here. Now, what I normally do with a film when something goes right or something goes wrong, you do a quick post-mortem. I break it down into sort of 4 different areas that are sort of under 2 big headlines: product quality, or product and marketing, essentially, is what it really comes down to. So product, you have product quality. Is it actually good or not? Is it a good film? According to critics, according to the audience, and then product conception. Was this conceived? Was this a good idea to even make this film from the start? And then with marketing, it's all about, how are the trailers, the quality of the marketing, and then the marketing sort of strategy or quantity. Did they market enough in the right places at the right time? So those sort of four buckets I usually like to discuss, doing a quick post-mortem. When you're looking at Alita Battle Angel, the thing that sticks out to me, and I think the thing that was a huge red flag for a lot of box office nerds who were following this, was essentially the product conception part of this. It looks interesting. It looks like a well-done sci-fi adventure movie. The problem is, who's your audience? And what is this story? Who is this character? Now, this is an IP from Japan. I believe it was sort of like, I want to say like a graphic novel. The way that they talk about graphic novels over there and the manga stuff is really foreign to me. So I don't really know where to put this. Essentially a graphic novelization that ran for about 5 years. So it was, it is a proven IP there. Probably with the broader spectrum of American audiences, they're not very well known. It's not like a Marvel character or anything like that. So you have a little bit of an unknown story being told. The hard part here, and Deadline really talks about this too, it's the current box office environment for stories that don't have a built-in audience is very tough, especially when you're talking blockbuster and sci-fi and comic book stuff. The requirement now is that you have millions of people that are bought in. That's one of the reasons why I think Venom surprisingly did so well this last October, is people just know. I knew Venom. Like, I grew up with like Spider-Man comic books. Like, I knew Venom and who he was and what he was all about. And so if you have a built-in audience, you can even have a film that's not very good. Venom's a terrible movie, but it did quite well because people were aware of the character, liked the character, and there was a built-in level of engagement and awareness that didn't exist for Alita. So they had a Grand Canyon to cross to get people to show up and have them buy tickets opening weekend, and they just weren't able to do it. It's a $200 million movie. The marketing costs in this probably had to be well over $100 million worldwide, I would say, probably in the 100 to 120 range. I think Fox probably hedged their bets maybe a little bit, but that's hard to do when you have James Cameron sort of backing the film. I'm sure he probably put some of his own money up to make this thing popular. So I think from a product conception viewpoint, it was a mistake to use this big of a budget on an unknown quantity like Alita. I don't understand spending $200 million on a movie about a comic book or graphic novel that just isn't massive and huge and doesn't have decades of a past to build an audience. It's not an MCU character. It's not a DC character. Like, why are you spending $200 million on it? That doesn't make any sense from a product conception viewpoint. Product quality, I think it's kind of middling. It's not a disaster. 59% Rotten Tomatoes, 6 out of 10 score from critics. Letterboxd 3 out of 3, Cinema Score A-, audience 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. So that's I'm getting a lot of mixed messages in those data points, but it wasn't a complete and utter product quality disaster. Now, the thing is, if it was like a 90% in Rotten Tomatoes and like an 8 out of 10 from critics on Rotten Tomatoes, that might have propelled this thing forward, but it would have had to hit that top shelf level for that product quality to really make a difference. I think the quality of this was kind of a push. From a marketing perspective, I mean, this thing was everywhere. It was massively marketed for the last 6 months. So it definitely wasn't marketing quantity or strategy. The quality of the marketing, I think, was a little bit sort of, it just didn't stick out to me as anything. It looked kind of banal and normal, like a cookie cutter sci-fi movie, like kind of an Avatar-ish sort of not great, not really intellectually stimulating. It's not like it was not represented as like a Blade Runner 2049 type sci-fi film. It was definitely represented like Moral Engine's Avatar, where it's a little bit more on the adventure-y side, just not as like intellectually rich as like, Blade Runner would be, or like, I was going to say like Alien Covenant, but that's probably not the best example. So I think, taking a big step back, what happened here, what's my take on it? I think the conception was just wrong. There's no reason to spend this amount of money on a film on an intellectual property and story like this. There's not enough built-in audience. So I would say like this could have worked if they cut the production budget down to about $50 million, which is very hard to do for a movie like this. And if they couldn't have done that, don't make it. That's what it really comes down to. With a movie like this, if you had to spend $150 million to $200 million to make it, there's no reason to hit the go button on this. Just don't do it. Maybe a TV series, but even then, it's not. There's so many other stories to tell. There's so many other like built-in audiences that you can engage with. Alita just wasn't big enough for this. That's, I think, the biggest reason. If the quality had been super high, yeah, maybe it makes significantly more money. I kind of doubt it. And I think on the marketing side of things, there wasn't much to work with. So I think it all really comes down to the conception. I just don't think you make this for under 50, 60 million bucks. If you can't do it, then don't do it, right? I think that's the issue here. The same thing with like Mortal Engines is another really a clear recent example of a product conception failure. Like there's no built-in audience for that. What are you doing spending, hundreds of millions of dollars making this? It doesn't add up to me. And so, and it's certainly not going to add up for Fox. I mean, you're looking at losses here, at least $100 million, maybe higher. This could be like the biggest flop. This is like a John Carter level flop here, which everybody saw from like a mile away. So, too bad for everybody involved, but, I don't think it was ever going to do well. There wasn't much they could do with this. So Alita Battle Angel, number 1, 27.8 million. Number 2, Lego Movie 2, the second part. I didn't do a show last weekend, so I didn't get to talk about this one this much. Did 21.2 million this weekend, a 37% drop, which is okay for a children's film. Right now it sits at $62.7 million total here at the end of its second weekend. This one, I'm perplexed. This is a week. There's a couple of movies that did poorly over the last couple of weeks that are really perplexing. This is one of them. I don't get it. Like the first one opened up at like over 60, and this one can't even get there at the end of its second weekend. I think that there's a lot that's been said. It's funny because I've covered every single Lego movie on this podcast, right? And so when the Lego Batman movie came out and did okay, I was pretty negative about that, maybe a little like overly negative, because it just felt so cynical to me that they were like pushing out a side character as a full-blown movie. Now, keep in mind, it was 3 years after the original movie. Let's do a quick Lego movie history so everybody's on the same page. The first Lego movie came out February 2014. To everybody's surprise, the $69 million opening weekend, which I still can't fathom, ended up at 257, a juggernaut, a grand slam for Warner Brothers, really surprising performance. But then they got sort of the greed in their eyes, and they're like, how can we really milk this franchise, right? So 3 years later, which is actually a pretty long time for a sequel. Usually you want a sequel to come out about 2 years after the original, just in general. It's not even a sequel they put up. They put out the Lego Batman movie, which opens up at 53, which is good, but ends up at 175. So a significantly lower multiplier than the original Lego movie, which kind of makes sense. It's not a bad movie. Lego Batman is a fun movie to watch. It's just sort of like, wait, why? Why didn't we just get Lego Movie 2? And then this is where things really fall apart, and this is where I got super negative on the Lego franchise. The fall of 2017, September, the Lego Ninjago movie comes out. I still don't know how to say that. I'm just going to call it Ninjago. It opens up at $20 million, which is, this is in 4,000 theaters. Opens at 20, closes out at below 60 at 59.2 million. It was a disaster for that movie. And by that point, it was very clear. I was just like, just move on to Lego Movie 2. What are you doing? Almost about a year and a half later, we get Lego Movie 2, but it's 5 years after the original Lego movie. And so this thing opens up at 34, less than half of what the original is going to do, or did. It's right now 6 at 62. I mean, like, what's your rosiest scenario for this? you're looking at probably just over 100 million. Let's say it does like the rosiest scenario, like 120 million dollars. That's less than half what the original did. So this is a flop. It's officially a flop. I don't think that Warner Brothers expected it to make as much as the original, but I think they thought it could hit $200 million pretty easily. And so let's do a quick postmortem on that. What happened? Product conception. I mean, it kind of proves itself. It's a sequel to a really super popular movie. The problem is it comes after the Batman and Django sort of offshoots. They diluted the sort of potency of that brand very quickly. It was a huge mistake by Warner Brothers to do that. I don't know why they thought that was a good idea. So from a conception standpoint, kind of a mixed message, right? Like, really great original movie, not only like financially successful, but creatively a big win, right? Everybody loves a Lego movie. I was super skeptical about it. I was like, oh, this is just a cash in, whatever, but it's a freaking awesome movie. So from a conception standpoint, it's like, yeah, we could do with the second one of those, right? Quality wise, it's not like an amazing top shelf film. Like, I think it's like a decent movie. This sequel, I don't think it matches the original, though, unfortunately, in terms of product quality. And then you think about like marketing and marketing. I mean, the thing about this, it's hard to pinpoint exactly why it has done so poorly. I think if you said to me, okay, we're going to spend, we're going to do 5 years after the original, after these two sort of offshoot movies, I mean, you can see the failure right there. It's not a product conception problem necessarily, but it is a problem of taking something that people love and sort of overdoing it, and drowning them in this sort of brand that worked in this isolated sort of moment with the original, but didn't work as well with Batman. It certainly didn't work well at all with the Django movie. So I think it's like a very typical sort of branding problem, where people just got tired out. They got sick of it. Like, they didn't want to see another one. In terms of product quality, I forgot to mention 85% Rotten Tomatoes. So it actually is a good movie. 79% audience score. So the product quality is there. I think they just watered down the brand, and I think people weren't excited. They weren't hyped to see this new one. And I think that's the main issue. And I think that's the fatal flaw here. It is, even with that being said, though, it is underperforming much more significantly than I thought it would. Even with that context, it still feels like a bigger failure. So there might be there's something there that I'm missing, where maybe it's the 5 years. It's just something to feel so off about that performance. It just seemed like such an easy win, like an easy grand slam for Warner Brothers. I think ultimately people just got tired of the Lego sort of brand, unfortunately. Okay, that's the quick take on Lego Movie 2. 21.2 million coming in number 2 this weekend. Number 3 is Isn't It Romantic, which is a Rebel Wilson romantic comedy. I think it's very meta. She's like inside a rom-com movie in the movie. Yeah, exactly. I thought postmodernism died like 10 years ago. Also, I get this movie confused with How to Be Single, which came out a few years ago, with her and Dakota Johnson. That movie was on like HBO like nonstop for like 6 months straight, so I've seen it like 100 times. That opened up at 17, closed out at 46. Isn't It Romantic opened up at 14, sits at 20 though, because it did open midweek. So it had a pretty good performance. I mean, 14.2 million in its open weekend's not bad. Per theater average is about $4,100. Sitting at 20.4 million now, and whatever, it's like 5th or 6th day of release. I don't know. I can't count. Okay performance, like not fantastic. Kind of similar to what How to Be Single did in that sort of realm. So it'll probably end up around $40 to $50 million. Definitely try to cash in with the Valentine's Day audience as well. I don't know, like, what's there to say about this? It looked so similar to that other movie. I was like, wait a second, is this like a sequel to How to Be Single? $31 million production budget. Rotten Tomatoes score was 69%. 6.1 out of 10 from critics. So it wasn't a bad film. Audience score 64%, a little bit lower. Letterboxd is 3.1, which is okay. I'm still trying to like get my sea legs with what the Letterboxd scoring means, because like real classics will be like 4.1, 4.4 out of 5. Like that's sort of like the limit. Like Aliens 4.3, which is like the king movie on Letterboxd, I imagine. So 3.1 is kind of middle of the pack, not great, not terrible. I think the thing with Letterboxd scoring is it's very severe drop-offs. Like if you go below 3, it's like terrible, but like 3 to like 3.8's like okay, and you go above 3.8, then it's like a classic top shelf film. And so Isn't Romantic, from that crowd of people, which I would consider sort of film nerds, an okay, not a bad, I mean, not a horrific rating, but it's not a good movie, right? No public cinema score yet. I'm not sure why. I think it might be related to them sort of holding back their scores until the end of the weekend. 3.5 on Post Track. So from a product quality perspective, it's okay. Very kind of your middle of the road rom-com quality here. With a $31 million production budget, that to me is a little bit high for what this is. You kind of have to wonder, like, let's do some cocktail napkin math here. Let's say it closes out at 45. It's probably not going to have a huge international audience here. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt and say 45% of its take is domestic versus international. So it might make $100 million worldwide. I guess that could be possible. I would say like 80 to 100 is probably realistic. I'm probably overstating its foreign take there. So, you know, $37 million production budget. Usually the rule, this movie's a little bit smaller than your normal wide release, so this might be skewed, but like 3x its production budget is probably going to be total cost. Yeah, this one's kind of in the break-even territory, it seems like. I would put the costs at just over $100 million. Revenue from a film is usually about 85% of its total worldwide box office. So this would have to make break even about $130 million worldwide to break even for Warner Brothers and New Line. That's not going to happen, but where those sort of calculations fall short are movies that fall outside like a big blockbuster or a big wide release. I think this one's going to do better on VOD. And maybe streaming rights, I think, will be pretty strong for this one, because it just doesn't have like, I need to go see this in the theater feel to it. Maybe DVD sales, EST, lets Electric sell through the digital version. I think that's going to be a little bit better than normal, so I think it's probably in the break-even territory, but it didn't break out at all. I thought it might, because it seemed like a pretty cool concept, almost like a Stranger Than Fiction kind of updated rom-com version of that. But it did not break out at all. I don't really see it going anywhere from here, since we're also past the Valentine's Day holiday. I don't see a lot of follow-up audience for Isn't It Romantic? So 14.2, sitting at $20.4 million right now. I say an okay performance. Number 4 is What Men Want this weekend at the box office. 10.9 million, a 40% drop. 37.50 is the per theater average right now, and it's end of its second weekend, sitting at $36.1 million. God, I got this one wrong too. Production budget on this was $20 million. I don't know. I thought this was going to do a lot better. I thought it was going to like open to like 25, 30, and it just didn't do that. I'm not sure why. I have no idea. I don't know much about this film either. From Paramount, an updated version of what sort of sequel to What Women Want. It just felt like I liked the marketing. I liked that they were going back to that film, which came out 2003. It was like a good time to do an updated version of that from a different perspective. I guess like the Time's Up, Me Too cultural stuff that's going on, it felt aligned with that. It just didn't pop off like I thought it was going to. So it sits at 36 right now. An okay drop this weekend, 40%, but that's not strong enough to have great legs to really have it power through and get a nice profit for Paramount. I just don't, again, like Isn't It Romantic kind of seems like a break-even movie. And now to a bigger film that did not perform well at all. Happy Death Day to You from Universal, but really from Blumhouse. This is the sequel to the October 2017 movie Happy Death Day to You, which really surprised a lot of people. It didn't surprise me that much because I knew Blumhouse and I loved the trailer to that movie. The original opened up at 26 and closed out, I want to say, at $56 million. A really strong performance from a film that cost about $4 million to make. It was very much the Blumhouse horror film model. Give a director sort of total freedom. Here's $4 million, not a cent more. Go see what you can do. And the one thing that Blumhouse sort of stresses, if you listen to interviews with him, Jason Blum, that is sort of the executive producer, head, whatever, founder of Blumhouse Productions, is they always pick something, a script that is very interesting and unique and new. And Happy Death Day to You, or Happy Death Day, was that. It was basically, it wasn't that like groundbreaking, but it was like, hey, let's make a slasher film that's basically Groundhog Day. And it worked really well. And the thing about that movie is it was just because of this release, this sequel coming out, they've been played on FX a lot. It really holds up well. It's a great little genre slasher flick. It really was, to me, like Happy Death Day to You is the paramount of the Blumhouse style, where it's clearly, it looks like it was shot for $30-40 million, to be honest with you, but it was shot for $4. Really interesting, strong scripts, tightly sort of wound narratives. It just moves really quickly and hits all the right notes and just keeps moving along. If something doesn't work, it doesn't matter because the scene's over. Like it's just like there's a very specific style to what they're doing, and it tends to work. As a horror fan, I love it. It's my style of horror. It reminds me a lot of like the Kevin Williamson, Wes Craven late 90s era when Scream did so well and there's all those copycats. They kind of do that, but they put out more of them, and they're probably even a little bit more polished than those movies were, because those felt a lot like cash-ins. Like, this is like the late 90s. These don't really feel like cash-ins. Like, Happy Death Day to You feels like, hey, this is an interesting script. Here you go, director. Here you go, young, sexy group of people. Go make this movie, and we'll see what happens. This is essentially what did happen. And it did quite well. And so, coming up with a sequel, from the moment it was announced, it's like, yeah, that sounds like fun. The real question is like, why? And so this weekend, Happy Death Day to You only did 9.8 million, which is not good at all. It was tracking at about 17 to 20 for the weekend. It was actually supposed to beat Alita Battle Angel. That did not happen. Alita overperformed a bit to its extremely low expectations. Happy Death Day to You is flopping. Now, it's all relative, I think, because it's a $9 million production budget, so not massive. But I think this movie, more than any other movie that came out this weekend, maybe even more than any other movie this year, has perplexed people with its poor performance. Like, I've been reading the, if you're interested in like box office stuff, go to the Reddit subreddit, our box office. It's a fun place to just catch up with what's going on, get some people's opinions. It's nerdy, it's wonky, but it's not like aggressively like mean like some other box office forums out there. So it's pretty chill. And I was going through the responses for to Happy Death Day to You and its poor performance, and I think people are just very confused by it. And I kind of wonder, why is that? I thought this thing was going to make at least $20 million opening weekend, but have a pretty low multiplier because it's a horror sequel. So it probably does like $45-50 million total. This thing's going to struggle to make $30 million. It's going to struggle maybe to make $25 million. So if we do our sort of quick like post-mortem, like what happened here? The original opened up a year and a half ago, opened up in October, in that sort of horror film slot 2 weeks before Halloween. So it had that going for it. It felt very fresh, very new. It was a good, fun slasher movie that people enjoyed. That's why it made $56 million. Now, from a product conception viewpoint, this first little bucket, so the original did well. Let's put out a sequel. It's not even 2 years later. It's a pretty quick turnaround on the sequel. And in fact, it was like the moment, I think they greenlit the sequel even before Happy Death Day had completed its first weekend or something. There was something crazy, like, or maybe that week, Jason Blum's like, yeah, we're doing the sequel. We're going to start filming like in a month. So it was a super quick turnaround, which also reminds me back to like Scream, when like Scream 2 came out a year later after Scream. They literally were filming it like as Scream was still playing in theaters. So it had that feel to it. Very quick turnaround on the sequel. I think, and the thing about Blumhouse is no stranger to sequels. Like, they made all the Paranormal Activity movies, which is like 8 of them. They made all the Insidious movies, Sinister, a Ouija. Like, they clearly know how to make sequels, right? It's not something that's totally new to them. So from a conception standpoint, it's like, okay, like, the big question that pops into my head is, do you need a sequel to this movie? And the answer is absolutely not. Like, the original was just, it was fun, but it was throwaway. It was kind of like horror and comedy, kind of a mixture, but a little bit more on the slasher side than the comedy side. This one seems like it's a little bit more on like the comedy sci-fi side of things. And so it just, I don't think anybody wanted a sequel to this movie because there just wasn't a need. The first one was so good and so like just well done that it ended and you're like, okay, that was fun. Like, I don't need to see this again. And so from a product conception viewpoint, not probably the smartest move by Blumhouse to do a quick turnaround on this sequel. Rotten Tomatoes score in terms of product quality, 66% from critics, 5.9 out of 10 is our actual score. Not great. So the Rotten Tomatoes score is actually fresh, but if you look at their real score, it's not fresh. Audience score 66%, right in line with critics. Letterboxd 3.2, not great, not terrible. One of the key callouts too. So the product conception was not a great idea probably to do a quick sequel, right? Product quality was middling, okay, not that much worse than the original though. Like the original was like a 72 or something on Rotten Tomatoes score. When you think about marketing, this is where Deadline has a really good take on this because they partner with a company called Relish Mix that does like social media metrics. And here's like the red flag that pops out when in this paragraph. And I'll just read the sentences. Relish Mix, which is a social media analytics firm. Relish Mix noticed a couple of things here. Social media diagnostics were down. The sequel's SMU, which is social media universe, I guess that's like total social media fans on all the different platforms, was at 70 million for Happy Death Day to You, which was behind the average horror movie of 82 million. That's really surprising to me. The average horror movie probably isn't going to have a huge social media universe, just because I don't know why. It's just they're throwaway movies. Everybody knows this. There's not a lot of brand loyalty to a throwaway slasher movie, right? So they're going to be low in general. The fact that Happy Death Day to You is lower than that is alarming. And I think also too, the viral video rate here, Relish Mix measures as a 20-1, whereas the original or the genre average actually is 25-1. So it was indexing social media wise below the average horror film. So that's, to me, that's just something wasn't connecting with audiences here at all. And I think it really, it sounds like it's a marketing problem, right? But that marketing problem, I think in the same way that Alita had a marketing problem, goes back to the conception problem. It's like, you've already done this. People understand what the original was. It was fun. Now we're done. Let's move on. There was no more story to tell within that character or in that sort of film universe. It's done. And they could have done like an anthology or something, but no. Like, so I think the issue here and why a lot of people are perplexed by it, especially box office nerds, because this felt like a shoe-in victory. This felt like an easy walk-off home run, easily going to make $40-50 million, no doubt. Why it didn't work is that audiences are changing a lot. Their attention spans are getting less and less. Just think about it as somebody who's a political news junkie. The news cycle is no longer a week. It's no longer a day. It's like 6 to 12 hours. And I think that sort of the rapid dissemination and movement of information, especially after the advent of social media, has changed sort of the cultural zeitgeist, where the shelf life of something is it's tiny. It's small. And so for a movie like Happy Death Day, that was really fun for the 3 weeks that people went to go see it. And now it's on TV again. Oh, that was a fun movie. But that's it. There's no extension there at all whatsoever. And so I think that's one of the reasons why this seems kind of surprising because in the past, this model has worked. I Still Know What You Did Last Summer did pretty well. Scream 2 did well. I think about all the Paranormal Activity movies that came out. Those all did well until like the last couple. The Insidious movies have all done well. Oh, I totally forgot about Purge. Blumhouse did all the Purge movies. And then there's like, what is it, like 4 of them? The last one, the one that came out last year, opened up at 17 July 4th that weekend, closed out at $69 million. So these things work, right? But the one thing that's different with like, and I'm thinking about like Insidious now, Last Key, which came out I think last year, and this new Purge, I think it was Purge Anarchy or something. What you notice in those sequels is that it felt like an entirely different group of characters and an entirely different universe that was sort of related to the last movie. Kind of like a second cousin or a cousin of the previous movie, and not like a direct like brother, sister, or child. You know, that there was a connection, but it wasn't like super direct. And I think that was the problem here, is the way that they marketed this and the way they made it look, hey, this is just a copy of the original one. It's like the original, but a little bit different. It's not just the main character who wakes up every day. It's like the 2 other side characters from the last movie. And you're sort of like, yeah, okay. Like, why would I care though? There just wasn't enough that was new and innovative here to really capture the audience's attention. And so it calls into question a lot of things. It calls into question just like brand awareness in general, how important that is. It's important, but if you're going to make something new, and Lego Movie is another example of this, just because it's a Lego movie and people have gone to see those movies before, doesn't mean they're going to show up to a new one. The new one has to be engaging. It has to sort of excite people in a very direct and visceral way. That's the sort of social media universe that we live in. It has to have a viral hype aspect to it, or people aren't going to show up. And I don't think Happy Death Day to You had any of that, which is proven in social media metrics. So I think that's what happened there. I think Blumhouse made some assumptions, and Universal, who distributes their films, made an assumption here that like, hey, if we just go back in and film another version of this, it's going to do well. Didn't work. Because it wasn't different enough, it wasn't new enough, it didn't have, and that's what, if it's not new and innovative and something interesting and distinct from the original, it's not going to get the high viral factor, and that way it's going to fail on social media and people that aren't going to show up. That's what happened with that Happy Death Day to You. I mean, it's pretty straightforward what happened. It's just still surprising because it does kind of upend a lot of these sort of old truths of the box office that are no longer true. Okay, so that's Happy Death Day to You. I think a big disappointment, and this is the second disappointment this year for Blumhouse. Blumhouse was hitting grand slams every step to the plate. Well, that's not true. It was like strikeout, 2 grand slams, strikeout, 2 grand slams. That was kind of their model of the last few years. But now that Glass is significantly underperformed, and this has, Glass is a bigger problem because it costs a lot more money to make, and the expectations were a lot higher. With this one, it's a loss, but it's not like a huge loss. It was because I didn't spend a ton of money making it. But it's still surprising, and I think Blumhouse has to go back to the drawing board a little bit with these sequels and start thinking about, like, maybe we gotta, like, it's funny because their entire model in making films is, let's do something that's new and innovative. That's the only thing that matters. We want I think he says, like, I want to make sure that the script is very strange and feels different and new. And they broke their own rule, and this is what happens. Okay, so that's Happy Death Day to You. This show is going long, folks. Sorry, I'm excited to be back. I love talking about this stuff. Let's quickly go through the rest of the top 10. I'll talk about what's coming out. We'll skip the award stuff. Cold Pursuit was in number 6. $6 million, 45% drop. Sits at $21 million. Liam Neeson's PR disaster did not help this film whatsoever, but not a terrible performance. $21 million at the end. It's 2 weekends for what is essentially a winter genre drop here. Just throwing this film out with the trash is essentially what Lionsgate was doing. Kind of like the Commuter movie you put out last year. Okay performance, but I think it was actually really hurt by Liam Neeson's just like bizarre racist story that he told. I still don't get what the hell he's talking about. So not a great performance, but not a huge flop. Number 7, The Upside from SDX, holding on strong, 21% drop, sits at $94 million. I think this is one of the bigger stories of the year so far, easily. Kind of a straightforward movie that felt like it could come out in 1995. That's doing really well. SDX needed a win. Kevin Hart, Bryan Cranston really sort of drove the audiences to this movie. So a great performance so far on that. Speaking of Glass, 38% drop. Did 3.8 million. Sits at $104 million so far. Not, again, only cost $20 million to make. A lot of that was M. Night Shyamalan's own money, probably. Not a great performance. Expectations were way sky high for this, especially on box office people, just because it felt like usually what you see is like a movie like Split comes out of nowhere and does really well. Then the sequel to something like that ends up doing even better because you've just built in this audience. That just did not happen with Glass for some reason. So Blum's second miss of the year so far, not good. With two movies that should have been just automatic wins, and they've unfortunately missed both. The Prodigy, small little horror film from Orion, which is now like a rebooted retro distributor. 3.1 million this weekend. $1,200 per theater average, only $11 million by the end of its second weekend. Terrible performance, but not that surprising because it wasn't even marketed at all. Green Book sitting at number 10, 20% drop, per theater average of $1,700. It's in its 14th week of release, sitting at $65 million. By far well, I guess that's not even true. It's like the third best Picture nominee. Black Panther's 1. Bohemian Rhapsody is probably 2, I would think, maybe. Bohemian Rhapsody is at $211 million. I still don't understand how that's possible. But Green Book closes out the top 10. Okay, maybe look a little bit of award stuff. I don't know. There's not much to talk about. Who's going to win? How's it going with the awards race? I have no idea. I feel like Rome is just going to sweep everything because all the other movies are going to cancel each other out. That's what it feels like. The Favorite, I think, has faded a lot over the last couple of weeks because no one went to go see it, really. It sits at, well, I guess that's not true. $31 million is not terrible. If Beale Street Could Talk is only at $14 million. So it's better than that. I just feel like the conversation around The Favorite has really faded a lot. Let's see. Star is Born still sticking $209 million for Star is Born. I think that's going to win some awards. Right now, I'm feeling Roma, Star is Born, maybe Bohemian Rhapsody, maybe Rami Malek wins. I don't know. We'll talk a lot more about the award stuff next weekend, as the Oscars are next weekend. So to close out the show here, I spent way too much time talking about the top 10. It happens, though. And a lot of big openers. So next weekend, what's going to happen here? How to Train Your Dragon, The Hidden World. I hear pre-sales in that are off the charts, so that could break out a lot. Maybe that takes some of the audience that didn't show up for Lego. They're going to go see the new How to Train Your Dragon movie. First one was great. Haven't seen any of the other ones. This one looks pretty good. I think it's going to do okay. Finding with My Family. Look out for this one, folks. Stephen Merchant directed this. What? The Stephen Merchant from The Office. And also from Hello Ladies, one of the finest HBO shows to ever be canceled after the first season. So that one, somebody tipped me off to this on some board, on one of the nerd boards. Finding with My Family did open this weekend on 4 theaters. I always say on 4 theaters, but an idiot. In 4 theaters. $32K per theater for an MGM movie about wrestling, directed by Stephen Merchant, starring Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Yeah, this one, I'm telling you right now, this thing is going to break the fuck out. Like, I don't know why did they decide to do a limited release on 4 theaters. Now, normally a $32K on 4 theaters is a pretty good opening, but that's for like an art movie. For a movie like this, that's like super good, and it's expanding wide. I'm telling you, folks, write this down. Finding My Family is going to break out. How much is it going to do overall? I have no clue. I have no fucking clue what's going to... I just know that it's going to break out. It just has that feeling to it. So that's going to go wide, I guess, next Friday, the 22nd. God, we're almost at the end of February. It's insane. Then we go into March. Let's talk about March really quick, and we'll close out the show. Greta opens up from Focus Features on March 1st. I don't know anything about this. Neil Jordan directed. I don't think it's going to do that. It's an arty film. It's not going to make that much box office. Tyler Perry's A Medea Family Funeral opens up also on the 1st. His movies are having, I feel like, diminishing returns. I think his brand has been tarnished a bit. I don't know why. Too much of him, I guess. I don't know. That opens from Lionsgate. I think it's going to do okay. The big one, though, is in March is Captain Marvel. Ooh, lordy. This one is going to be fun to follow. I might even do a preview show on this one just to talk about comic book movies more because I love doing that. MCU's first female-driven sort of launch flagship movie. I don't know what the hell you'd call it. Solo movie, I guess. Captain Marvel, just really quickly, there is stuff going back and forth with this movie. I don't think anybody knows how well this thing's going to do. I think my initial reaction, it's an MCU movie. It's a new character, so it might have, but we said that about Black Panther. Black Panther just like destroyed all records, right? So we can't really use the new character as an excuse anymore for MCU, for doubting MCU. So I think with this one, my expectation for Captain Marvel would be just like trying to compute it in my head, all the context with it. My read would be like, I don't know, like 130-ish million, 130 to 160, somewhere in that range. Now, normally the MCU, you're looking at least 160, well over 150. I don't get that feeling. This one, it feels a little bit more muted response. It would be weird to see this go under 130, though. If it went under 130, it would feel off. It would feel like people aren't showing up because they want to go see the last Avengers movie and they don't want to see this one yet. That's what it would feel like. If it goes like below 100, I mean, then that's a canary in the coal mine for MCU. That like, oh my God, what are we going to do after this last Avengers movie? We've already made billions of dollars. We're all rich for the rest of our lives. But where does MCU go after the last? That's really what Captain Marvel's about. Just thinking from a box office perspective, business perspective, it cues the direction of where MCU is going after the Avengers series is over, which ends in what April, a couple of months. Well, technically May, whatever. If Captain Marvel significantly overperforms, they're on the gravy train for like the next 5 years. They can put out any character they want as long as it has the MCU sort of house style. People are going to show up and love it. If it significantly underperforms, which I would say anything under 130 on the way down, then the post-Avengers world looks a little bit more murky for MCU. Not a disaster, but it's sort of just like the question of where do we go from here becomes bigger. Because if it does well, you know where you go from here. You keep on making movies like Captain Marvel, Thor Ragnarok, like those all work. Black Panther 2, like just keep making movies like that, and like they're gonna all make $200 million in profit from here on out for like the next decade maybe. But if it does significantly underperform, then the winds may be changing a bit with MCU, right? And then the rest of March, 5 Feet Apart, Wonder Park. I don't know anything about those movies. Hotel Mumbai from Bleecker Street comes out on the 22nd. Us. I don't know that. Oh, that's the Jordan Peele movie. That should be massive, right? $20 million production budget. Blumhouse. Here's Blumhouse's win that they need right here. Us is going to open to like $50 million easily. And then Dumbo, I forgot that was coming out, is coming out at the end of March. I mean, March is all about Captain Marvel, and I think Us. Those are the two ones to really focus on. And I think the movies that came out this weekend are all going to fade super fast, so we won't be talking about that much longer. Okay, thanks, folks. Thanks for sticking with me here. I will be back next weekend. We'll talk a little bit of Oscar stuff. We'll talk about what happens next weekend. Thanks for listening. This has been the Wildline Podcast.